All right. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off here. So, welcome to another episode of Love Letters to Star Trek The Next Generation, our 3-year mission to review each and every episode. And as always, want to thank everyone for co-creating this wonderful space and event together. It's such a nice thing to have every week to sort of bring a Star Trek episode to a group of enthusiasts and talk it over. And Star Trek for me is kind of one of those time capsule type of series where I've rewatched it at so many different points in my life. I can kind of evaluate like how I felt like the first time I watched it, the second time, and I like talking about how the episodes kind of changed meaning like over time. It's just so fascinating to me, and we couldn't do it without being together. And welcome, Lalang and Fogo. Also, very good to see you. Glad you could come in. Oh, thank you so much for your patience there. And welcome, Rick World. um, so yeah, when I am tired, there will be signs. And I'm surprised I didn't notice too, because like on the very first slide here, there was a picture of like the old Alt Space Avatar, the one that kind of was a pseudo Star Trek uniform, and that should have tipped me off that that was a much older presentation. So here we go, and I'm just gonna make a check here. Yeah, it looks like audio's good. So yeah, this week's episode is gonna be called Inheritance. So in this episode, the Enterprise is dispatched, like it is many times, to help some world that's in trouble. In this case, the world's inner core, like underneath its mantle, is solidifying. And while they are in the process of problem solving, somebody approaches Data and claims to be his mother. And I always really love these little backdrop stories that they have in Star Trek. Many Star Trek episodes are these kind of morality tales that are like wrapped in a sci-fi theme. But I always love the little sci-fi backdrops of these episodes. And in this case, we're talking about a planet whose core is kind of solidifying, kind of cooling over the years. And we can think about that in terms of our own planet here, where we have all these different aspects of the Earth's core. Right underneath the crust, we have the mantle, and then there's a liquid outer core and an inner core. And mainly what differentiates them is like the temperature that they're at. They're basically molten iron and nickel like mixed together at different temperatures. So the temperatures create these like three different zones, and they all sort of rotate and move like at different paces. So if that process were ever interrupted by some kind of cooling or catastrophe, it would be a lot of trouble for us because there's a lot of dependency on that process, much like the tides or, the rain cycle, all these different processes that the Earth has, like the inner core is a huge part of that as well. And one thing I thought kind of funny about this image is that they included this compass, like north, south, east, west, even though it's really like a three-dimensional space. So, I thought that maybe that should have been replaced with the X, Y, and Z coordinates of a three-dimensional space. So I thought that was a funny, like, happy little accident that compass was included on a three-dimensional image. But mainly, I wanted to talk for a second about the Earth's magnetic field because it's incredibly important to life on Earth. Without it, we would undoubtedly not survive. But to get into it a little bit, we have to talk about like the physics of field theory. which is a concept that's so advanced. Like I have to like research it like in the moment to really feel like I have a grasp of it. It's like I can't hold a grasp of it because it's so complicated. I always have to like refresh my understanding of it. But I'll try to describe in a nutshell. Is basically there's four fields in physics, theoretical physics. There's four fields, and three of the fields have been kind of proven through scientific experimentation. And the one left that we haven't proven in physics is actually gravitational force. So there's a theory that there's this particle out there called a graviton, which they're searching for through the Large Hadron Collider experiments to see if they can find out more about this particle, this theoretical particle, and if it would help us understand gravitational force. In addition to gravitational force, there's three other fields: electromagnetic, strong nuclear, and weak nuclear. And the way the Earth's magnetic field operates, it falls into the electromagnetic force spectrum. So essentially the way it works is the Earth's mantle has all of this metal, all of this iron and nickel, and as those different temperatures create different speeds, you almost get this kind of generator effect where there's magnetism in those metals. And there's also the types of metals that create electricity when they are going in motion through magnetism. So the electromagnetism kind of works like hand in hand. Like a metal moving through magnetism will create an electric current, and an electric current like then creates magnetism. So they're sort of like joined at the hip. And what happens is as the Earth's inner core like works as this generator, it creates magnetism and it surrounds the Earth with this kind of magnetic shield, this invisible shield. And we can sometimes see that when the sun has one of those solar mass ejections, like recently that aurora that like basically blanketed the whole northern hemisphere. Where many people that had never seen the aurora before suddenly had this wonderful view of it. And, that's kind of an example of the particles from the solar mass ejection, like hitting our magnetic field and exciting the particles to glow kind of like a neon light would. And so without this magnetic field, if I can just take us forward to the slide here, the Earth would just be a sitting duck for the solar wind, which is carrying all this radiation and highly charged particles. They would just hit the Earth's surface without any interruption, whereas with the Earth's mantle like spinning around like a generator and creating this magnetism, it's sort of routing the solar wind like around the Earth in this protective shell. So if anything ever happened to our core, if it started rotating weird or cooling down, we would definitely be in trouble and need to look into that because it could, eventually completely wipe out, life on the planet. But those are just like these wonderful little sci-fi nuggets of backstory, whereas like the real main plot of the story is that someone comes aboard claiming to be Data's mom. So I'm just going to play a quick clip of that to sort of introduce much of tonight's topic. A couple of things that I really like in that scene is, really good writing where as she's, proclaiming to Data that she's his mother, and Data's initially like very skeptical, and he goes through this methodical like fact-checking exercise of trying to corroborate her story before he fully embraces it, which is like responsible, but it's such a totally Data thing to do, to just be like, excuse me while I check your story, and create this kind of really awkward situation. And in another aspect of that scene that I like is, Data's really bothered by this fact that he has experiences of which he has no memory. He's hearing these stories and he can't bring anything to his memory banks, because these are things that happened before his memory was wiped. And I think that parallels as a metaphor to our own human experience too, because, largely many of our memories don't fully form until we can sometimes be like even as old as 4 years old. We can sort of struggle to recall. So we have all these instances where a parent like has these stories about us, and we're just like, I have no idea like what you're talking about. I'll just have to take your word for it. So I loved that aspect that this brought, is that sort of interesting window in our lives that we have just like no memory of. And oh my goodness, I got a request from Humble Dancer to join, and I had no idea. She might not already be in the group, so I hope that gets her in here. Let's make sure I send her an invite. I don't, apparently, must be a new account. I actually don't have a friend. Okay, so I hope she makes it in. I'll watch Discord. And also, welcome, Ender. I'm glad that you could join us. Great to see you. And this was a super fun scene as well, where, if you've ever been in the situation where your parents get a chance to be around your friends, like at a dinner or just hanging out, and they love to bring up these little like embarrassing anecdotes of like who we were as a child. We knocked something over, or we fell in the water or something, and the way Jordy just so like has this tongue-in-cheek look on his face when he's sitting down, and he's like, I can't wait to hear all of these, like, kind of gossipy stories about Data. I thought that was a fun moment and very relatable. And I thought this scene was interesting here, too, because, like I talked about a little bit earlier, when you have Star Trek under your belt, like as a young watch through, you sort of have all of these different periods of time and phases of life that you've seen Star Trek. And I can remember seeing this episode and kind of feeling like, man, this guy's a jerk. Like, he's totally not confident in Data. He's like questioning his abilities. And now as a theoretically much more mature adult, I'm really not taking offense to him questioning Data's capabilities, because we're talking about like operating, almost doing like a surgery on his planet. So he's expressing these immense concerns that this operation, like, are the calculations correct? He's sort of handing over this trust to the Enterprise to do this major geological work on his planet and hope that it's okay. So I'm discovering that there's this real fine line between like offense and understanding, and it's really helping in communication when you're not like reactive to how people are feeling. If it's challenging your beliefs or what you were planning to do, it's really nice to take a pause and really like try to understand like where is that person coming from, and I feel it really helps relating. And in this watch through, I took absolutely no offense to this guy questioning Data, even though he's such a beloved character of ours. And of course, as we work further and further through the plot, we get closer and closer to this kind of revelation of a really dark secret in the family. And this is the moment that I think it kind of triggers, her memory in a sense, where she's, it's kind of dominating her mind after this point. So let's go ahead and play that clip. And also want to give a shout out to Fuzz. I see you over there. I'm glad you could also join us. So during this watch through, I didn't really have a clear reflection of memory of this episode. I didn't totally remember where the plot goes. And when I initially saw this scene, I kind of was like a little bit, triggered by it, because I was like, she just learned about one of the most like difficult moments of Data's life, and she she reacts to it, but then they just kind of blow over it and start practicing. So it wasn't until like later in the episode when I realized that this is the moment that like the desperation to get out these like family secrets like sort of started, and she wasn't ready to do it in this moment. So in hindsight, I feel like I understood the reaction here much clearer. But I wanted to include this scene because this is where it really like comes out, this giant kind of family secret. Yeah, what a great actress that scene. Very emotional delivery, and like I was saying earlier, as the plot kind of trickles forward, you almost kind of get the sense of how dare she as she goes, because she sort of just like claims the mantle of Data's mom, and doesn't like really fully earn it. She just kind of steps in and I'm your mom, and let's do mom and son things. And but it was this moment where I think she really did the first like really motherly thing, which was explain like their relationship, these secrets that she wasn't able to really communicate clearly to him, because there was this kind of like hidden secret blocking a true connection. So just what a wonderful moment of sort of explaining something incredibly these feelings of deep rooted like shame and regret, but finally telling him. And welcome, humble dancer. I'm glad that you made it in. I saw your message, and I did approve the group join, but sorry it didn't work out that way. I'm glad you made it. And one of the things that I feel like that conversation like opens up also is the presence of like generational or cyclical trauma in a family. So this decision that she made to leave Data behind when her and Dr. Nini and Sung were escaping from that crystalline entity, if you remember, like Lore lured the entity to the planet, and basically let the entity like destroy all life on the planet in exchange for it taking Lore out into whatever he wanted to do. So they were escaping from that whole situation, and she said, we can't take Data. So what comes to mind is like, well, what led her to that decision? And it was because of what she saw Lore had become. And also before Lore, there were these 3 other androids, and she viewed them kind of as like her children. So as each one was lost, it was much like Data losing Lal, that incredible like sense of emotional loss and grief. And then Data would come along as number 5 with absolutely no proof that any of these androids had the ability to survive or even be good people. So she made the best decision that she could at the time. And of course, as she watched Data grow and join the Federation and win all of these awards and notoriety, she started really regretting that decision. And here was her chance to tell her. So often, the trauma that you can sometimes receive from parents really has this history that predates like even being born. Our mothers and fathers, our grandfathers, grandmothers, our great-great-grandfathers and mothers, they've also had these nuanced lives, and, not all of them really went well. And you can knowingly or even unknowingly kind of pass these traumas down. So it kind of comes back to our reoccurring theme of only being as sick as our secrets. These deeply rooted wounds and feelings of shame, if we keep them inside and we don't find a trusted person to be able to share them with, they sort of alter our behavior. So if we look at their initial meetings, one of the things I thought was strange is she sort of waits until the meeting is over to say, "Oh, by the way, Data, I'm your mom." Like, wouldn't she have sought Data like right as soon as they beamed on board, possibly, or sent him a message or something in advance? And then she just immediately claims this title of being his mom, without really giving him any room to adjust to it. And she really rushes the connection, like she, attempts to hold his hand at the table, and he pulls his hand back because he doesn't quite feel, he's feeling a little bit of shock. And when he tells her about his desire to procreate once again, he had that wonderful but also deeply grieving situation with Lull. He explains to her, "I'd like to create, another android. I'd like to try it again." And she actually discourages him from it. And, of course, the real big, elephant in the room is, ultimately she did abandon him. And all of these, behaviors and situations, are kind of coming because of the lack of transparency of those experiences she finally shared. So when you have family secrets and when you keep family secrets, it sort of influences how each other communicates. It's like you're subconsciously kind of aware that there's things in the background, and you never really understand why someone behaves or communicates a certain way. And then once they share, you're like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand these behaviors, and it sort of brings things back to a much closer and equal footing. So if you're ever in a situation where you can build, deeper, trusting relationships with family and close friends, I really find that it's rewarding to share things that are difficult, and these are the reasons why. And welcome, Mason. So happy to see you too. Glad you could come in. And we did get kind of a indirect mention of before that there were the other androids that were before Lore that kind of weren't quite as developed. So I'm not really a huge fan of the direction that the motion picture stories took. I thought the TV show brought like a much deeper quality of writing, but we did get to meet before in the movies, and I just want to tip my hat to the naming convention, because I think before was like sort of meant to be like before Data existed. I always thought that was kind of cute. And there's really so much power in saying we're sorry for something that we've done to harm somebody. And it's not the word sorry. I think like what it really means is, if I had known what I know now and the ability to sort of change what I've done in the past, like I would. I think that's what sorry kind of means. It's like I've reflected on how things went, and I really wish that I could make them different. And it's so incredibly powerful to hear. Many of the times that we feel wronged in life, I want to say the majority of times we feel wronged in life, we will never get an I'm sorry for it. It can break relationships, and you ultimately never talk or have any pathway to like come to a new understanding. But when it really happens, it's incredibly healing, and not just for the person who may have been wronged or harmed, but for both parties. It's an incredible start to like a new, stronger connection. And I almost see like some elements of this episode if we go back to when Riker, met his father. Like his father came aboard, and Data's mother kind of came aboard with all of this, emotional disclosure and support. And, Riker's father kind of came in and just said, things were hard and I might not have done the right things, but I love you, dang it. And now I'm just gonna bail again. So the two parties like really approached their sons differently, and I really respect Data's mom, because I know initially she wasn't really going to tell him, she was going to keep the secret, but I think as soon as she learned how he experienced the grief from Lowell, she was like, I have to tell him this, and it really deepened their relationship. And of course, and in this surprise twist that Star Trek does so well, she's ultimately an android. So we find out that she, eventually left Dr. Noonien Soong, and he kind of transferred all of her memories and experience into an android. And what's incredible is, this is probably Dr. Soong's like pinnacle of work. Like, she is so incredibly human, and she has all these aspects. Like, if they scan her with a tricorder, there's these, devices that sort of read her as a human. So that's very hard to detect that she's an android. And so that she never learns the secret, anything that could potentially process the knowledge that she's an android, like automatically shuts her down. So she's kind of living this life that's pre-programmed to expire at some point with with absolutely no knowledge that she was constructed by Dr. Soong. And we know this is possible from the earlier episode of Schizoid Man, where the doctor kind of pushed his consciousness into Data, and ultimately gave it up because Picard convinced him that he was causing all kinds of harm, and that Data had the right to exist. He was there first, but in that process we kind of found out about that they are introducing the concept of transferring consciousness into androids. And, I often wonder if, like, what that process would look like. Like, if you somehow connected, like, a hard drive to your body, and you sort of moved, like, one neuron over at a time, like, into digital space. Like, at what point would the transfer occur? And would the transfer effectively end your consciousness and like start a new digital one? I don't know why. These are the kind of things I think of when I'm like trying to go to sleep. But it's so interesting to me, because I often wonder, like, if we eventually get to this theory of like transferring our consciousness into like a robot, would it truly be us, or would our experience like end and we would become like a facsimile of ourselves that would start its own consciousness? And that kind of came up as I was watching the scene. So Data gets to find this chip that was implanted in his mom's neural cortex, and it ultimately ends up being this hollow representation of Dr. Soong, who's also pre-programmed to answer questions if it happens to be Data that finds her. And Dr. Soong, he requests, like, don't let her know that she's an android. It's my wish that she live out her life, feeling like she's human. So yet we have this yet another family secret, and ultimately Data decides not to tell her. Instead of telling her she's an android, he just helps her to feel that Dr. Soong really loved her. He just never figured out how to express it. And I think that kind of emotionally touched her. So now we have this full circle of her keeping a secret from Data, and her mom, or her father, asking Data to keep a secret from her mom. So it's just this like real cyclical sharing of secrets here, and ultimately we're left with another secret where she doesn't know she's an android, which coincidentally, if anybody ever finds out, I would like to know if I'm an artificial being. I give you permission to tell me. I think in many respects, Captain Picard is kind of Data's like a godfather or a surrogate father. I don't know the real kind of name for the role, but Captain Picard is a huge mentor to Data, and I absolutely loved the moment where he was just like, "Whatever you decide, we're here to support you. So you're clear to make your own decision. We're not going to try to influence it." And recognizing it was a really difficult decision at the same time. So kudos to Picard for just always being that like really supportive kind of mentor, fatherly figure. He's such an incredible captain in that way. And Q's judgment is Mama. Ooh. Sorry. And I didn't rank this episode. I don't really quite know why, but this episode's never really been all that memorable for me. It's intriguing, but it doesn't have that kind of impact and production value and intrigue that a lot of the other episodes had this season. So, just decided ultimately not to rank it. And we'll be back here for Parallels next week, which, if I'm remembering that episode right, I'm kind of looking forward to that one. I think I always thought that was a good one. And all right, so let me just stop our stream real quick, and we'll jump into open discussion. And if anybody happens to be on the stream, thank you for beaming in, and really enjoyed it. I'm just going to go ahead and stop it here.